Good morning. Good morning. Jabba Delight will uplift you. Stay tuned. The show is about to begin. Grab your coffee. Stay tuned. This show is about to begin.
Good morning, Miss Ilse. How the heck are you out there in rainy South Africa?
It's a rainy, sunny day. Weird as that sounds. The sun is shining outside, but it's raining. So, welcome to the weird wonders of South Africa.
Sounds like one of those Christmas songs that we have here. Let it snow, let it snow, let it rain, let it rain, let it rain.
Let it rain. Yes, the wind is a bit blowy and I don't see any thunder clouds, so hopefully we don't have thunderstorm this afternoon. But there's like this little bit of rain that's falling, not something hectic.
Wow, check it out. So far, all of the good morning comments are from women.
Wow, and it is Women Crush Wednesday, so all my crushes are Hollywood, Mama, Gotti, Shauna, and all the women on our page. Women Crush Wednesday. Hi, Hollywood. Hi, Shauna, Mama Gotti. Glad you guys could join us.
Wow. So what? I do not have an update on Brandon. I did just text him this morning, but I haven't gotten anything back. I hope he's doing well, but because I haven't heard anything directly from him yet.
Neither have I, and we miss him. We miss him a lot.
Absolutely. Trying to wish him the best and send him healing energy to try to help him and his mom and dad to overcome
Mommy
COVID.
Croucher, Daddy Croucher.
Yeah.
Sending them healing vibes.
Yeah. You never know how it's going to affect somebody and how the doctors are going to treat it. And I think that's maybe the bigger challenge is how are the doctors actually going to treat it? Different doctors treat it differently. And some of the protocols are good and some of them are not so good or not as good. Let's put it that way.
No.
So wishing B and the Croucher family the best and speedy recovery because we need them back on the show.
We do. How have you been feeling? Have you been tired? How's your sleeping going?
Well, the days here in Las Vegas are numbered, and I'm down to about 10 days. 10 days to pack up, 10 days to get everything organized, 10 days to try to deal with making my mom and dad feel comfortable because they know I may be selling the house this spring, which is already kind of freaking my mom out. So a lot of different things going on, and at the same time trying to still close the deal in South Dakota. Yesterday was a crazy day because the hotel that I originally wanted to buy that went to auction and was purchased by someone else. Well, yesterday we found out that whole deal fell through, which is what we expected. And then there's new personalities involved out there. It's been really interesting. One day it seemed like a month's worth of events were happening. So,
oh wow! So you had a hectic day yesterday.
Crazy hectic day. Just thinking about possibilities and then having those possibilities kind of dashed at the same almost as fast as I could think of them. There were things coming up saying, nope, that ain't going to work. This person's not going to be the right person to partner with. It was crazy.
Oh wow, I love it when the universe just comes out and shakes things up and you think that things are going to work this way and they swap it around and it works a different way. I mean, you guys can still maybe get the hotel. If you have a choice between the hotel and the bar, will you choose the hotel? Hey Brian, hey Kevin.
Well, at this point in time, no, because the hotel is a much bigger project and the purchase is just the beginning of the expense. You know, the purchase was like 500,000, but it would take a minimum of 500,000 to kind of get it more organized, and probably closer to $1 million or $1.5 million to really get it to be fully functional. So the bar is turnkey. So as soon as we close, we could open it up and start generating money. So that's probably the direction that we're going to go for now. So it's just crazy how, like you said, how the universe does things and keeps you on your toes. And like I always say is, you know, keep your goal in mind, because how you get there, you're not sure. And when you're going forward, sometimes you make a U-turn and got to come back around and figure out, you know, the next way to get past the obstacles or overcome the challenges or take advantage of those opportunities. So yeah, now it's really still focused on the bar and getting to the end goal, which is a much bigger vision that I have for the town. But good things are going to be happening.
We've got a request from Shauna that says, could the Delight family send positive vibes to my friend's son? He has the flesh-eating bacteria and is in the hospital. This is the same kid that was suicidal. Sorry to hear that, Shauna. We are sending so much love and vibes. Sorry,
absolutely.
Sorry, you guys have to go through that. That is very rough. So we're definitely sending you positive vibes and healing vibes. And to anybody here that doesn't wanna ask for healing vibes, you're gonna get it in any case. So much love. Hey Sherry. Sherry is here. Nice Brian. To see you.
Should be an interesting show today. So let's go on to other things. Anything else exciting happening down in South Africa?
Well, apparently we heard today that they're opening the airports again next week. So I don't know. Yes, I don't know how true that is. I just heard because I don't watch news, so I just heard in the passing by that they might be opening the flights again next week, because I can't prove that the variant came from South Africa. So closing the airports is not gonna help them. So I really don't know. That is what I heard. As I said, I'm not too clued up with what's going on. I've seen that there's quite a bit of marches going on because people don't want to take the vaccine, and those kind of things. So I think everywhere tensions are mounting high with the mandates and things like that the presidents and the government and everything is bringing in. So we'll see what happens. I mean, nobody can predict the future, but
right. I think that they're, like I always say, that by the time they figure out or they come up with this, you know, they found this new variant, it's already spread, and the chances are that just because they found it somewhere doesn't mean that originated there. South Africa just happened to be the first ones to find it and identify it.
Yes. And the reason for that is, as I said previously, I don't know, South Africa is very good because AIDS is a huge problem in South Africa. The DNA testing and the quality of scientists that we have working on that was the ones that helped us, or helped find the new variant. So, and then they just went off and said it came from South Africa, which is not true at all. So I don't know what I'll keep you guys up to date as I hear things, but it sounds like they're opening the international flights again in a week or two. But how true that is I'm not sure.
Yeah, wishing South Africa the best so that they're no longer isolated from the rest of the world.
It's not a new thing that's happened so many times. I mean, when in the 80s, I think South Africa wasn't even allowed to travel to any other countries and play in the World Series or play Rugby World Cup and play against New Zealand or all those places because they boycotted because of the
that was
racial
apartheid, right?
Yes, because of apartheid and everything. So we used to being set in the corner because we're naughty. Nothing new. All South Africans to the naughty corner. So we must see what happens. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I remember even in the let's see, it would have been about mid 90s. I had a project where I was managing an implementation. One of the guys on my team was a developer, computer coder from South Africa, and his family was still back in South Africa. And that was when they were going around and setting fire to things and chopping people with machetes.
That's just a Monday. That's a Monday. And I'm not even joking. You will wake up on a Monday morning and you will find out that you can't drive through a certain road because they are doing public service marches. Or petrol increase marches or what, and they'll shut down a whole street and city. You won't be able to get to work. They will set cars alight, burn down. They had a couple of years ago, they had the no fees for university, and the protest got so out of hand that students couldn't go to university because they burned down the public libraries, they burned down the school libraries, burned down classes because they wanted no fees for university. They wanted people to go to university for free. So that's like a normal Monday or Tuesday for us.
Wow. I mean, that's intense.
Yeah, no, South Africa is not for sissies. It's really, if you go deeper and you start, I mean, a couple of months ago, they had the protest in KwaZulu-Natal, the area in Durban, that was so violent that they had to send the army out, and that because they locked up the previous president that's got rape cases and things against him, and corruption. They caught them stealing the money and everything. So our politics, you think you guys have problems? You ain't seen nothing yet. Yeah, you ain't seen nothing
it's amazing how such a beautiful country with the kind of natural resources and wildlife and everything that is there is just so kind of out of control at times in terms of how things are addressed.
I mean,
it's because there was so many years of repression. I don't know. Maybe it's because you've got
cycles.
And it's. I mean, it's kind of like it's not. It's kind of like and not like here in the U.S. where you've got many people that get classified together. So, for instance, you classify Latinos here, but Latinos tend to be Mexican, Puerto Rican, Cuban, South American countries, all grouped together, but they're not one voice. They don't all, I mean, they don't even get along, a lot of them. And yet we say that they're Latinos. And
the Africans are the same. You cannot tell a Sotho he's the same as a Zulu because their cultures are completely different. The way they see the world's completely different. They might have the same pigment, skin pigment, but that is where it stops. That is literally where it stops. It's the same with the white people in South Africa. We are all from these English people here. There's everything here. So getting classified as that is a big thing. I mean, especially for a country that has had bad racism and racial problems since, I mean, years and years and years, hundreds of years.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's crazy. I mean, and this is, the diversity of life and the diversity of cultures and the diversity of thinking is phenomenal. And I think we need to embrace that, but we also need to recognize how that creates differences in the way that we look at things, and that we don't prejudge people based on superficial things, because we don't know what it is that their true background is. We don't know, even within, you can take it all the way down to within a family. My sister is religious and goes to church on, Sundays, and has her kids going to Sunday school and all of that kind of stuff. And I'm not religious at all. I believe in universal energy and frequencies and things like that, which she does too, but she's about God and Jesus and all that kind of stuff. And I'm about, that doesn't make any sense to me. So
the thing is, you can be about anything, because if you start to think, and look at the bigger picture, there's 8 billion, well, after COVID, maybe 9 billion people on Earth, because and everybody, you are born, and then you are given an identity, and you are giving a religion, and you have to fight your whole life for those things that were given to you. It's not you. It's not your identity. It's when you get caught up in what you, if you don't, how can I say this? If you don't want to go and look for answers, you are going to be stuck in the same cycle or same mentality as how you were raised, because you're not looking at the bigger picture, because literally that's all you know is what you were taught from your parents, until you start thinking for yourself and think, maybe it's about how I treat people and not what people look like. And that makes a difference. It's like Brian says, even within a culture, there are differences. Even within a household, we all have different experience. Because with me, it's the same. My parents are huge Christians. And even my smoking cigarettes, they tell you you're going to hell. They treat you like shit. They do not care. It's an addiction, whatever. You're not allowed to smoke. And they'll rather treat somebody like shit that smokes cigarettes than live according to their Bible and not judge, because it's got absolutely nothing to do with what's going on around you, but how you are as a person and how you treat people. You need to be consistent, and you need to be kind to your fellow man, because we're all connected. We're all here. We've all been put here. We asked to come back. That's how I believe. But you were put into a situation to grow out of that situation.
yeah, that's why I think that, there some of the things that should probably be taught in school, but it becomes very difficult because you don't know how the teacher is going to present it. Is cultural diversity, is religious diversity, is to teach people to evaluate their belief systems. Like I always say, question the BS of your BS, question the bullshit in your belief system, and make sure that it really is yours. Like you were saying, as you grow up, you're fed this from the time you're born, literally. And you grow up thinking this is me, but that's because you haven't ever really questioned it. And oftentimes there's significant stress in your life that you don't even know where it's coming from, because what you were brought up to believe and actually how you really are in terms of your identity are not on the same level. And you're having this argument going on in your brain, and that's creating stress in your life. So, and that carries on into then the whole prejudice and the grouping together of people based on many different things. I mean, even today, if you're to look at this whole thing with the vaccine and the virus, the news media is trying to divide people. And
That's
they're
what they
trying
go
to
out
group
to
people
do.
together.
Mm.
And they're saying, if you don't want the vaccine, those are all anti-vaxxers, and anti-vaxxers are bad. And well, first of all, just because you don't want the vaccine doesn't necessarily mean that you're an anti-vaxxer. You may agree with vaccines in other areas. I follow a number of immunologists and virologists that were instrumental in creating vaccines that are currently, used in other
Polio and those
areas.
kind of
But
things.
they're
Yes.
saying this is the wrong time, the wrong vaccine, the wrong way of addressing this. And they've been in the world of creating vaccines prior to this. So when we start grouping people together like that, when we start generalizing, that's when you really start creating massive challenges. Get back to where you get a chance to meet people one-on-one. And when you do that, you find out that there's so much more in common than different, that you can find that if you're looking for ways that you can come together, you'll find them. If you're looking for ways to differentiate or divide, you'll find them too.
Exactly. You
So
find what you
decide
look
which way to
for.
focus.
It's where you focus and everything. And the question that I like to ask people is, who were you before they told you who you were? I mean, if you can sit in the darkness and you can think of that, who am I outside of my religion? Who am I out of my belief systems? Who am I outside of my of the rituals and those kind of things that I learned from my parents? What kind of person am I? You're either going to be a person that always does good for yourself first and foremost and make decisions for yourself to heal yourself and keep yourself healthy mentally, and then you start doing it for the next person. And you need to vibrate or show people what love is. It doesn't matter what religion you are, because if you take religion out of school, it's maybe a good thing, and you only teach them love, only teach them how to love someone that doesn't look like you, or how to treat someone that doesn't have the same opinion like you. That should be a class. How to sort out, how to communicate, and how to how can I say, get used to people from different cultures and thinking that you are right and they were wrong, because who told you you were right? Your parents told you, and who told them they were right? Their parents told them, and that's how it goes. But you don't know in what mental state those people were when they thought of those teachings, or thought of those quotes and everything, or thought of the divide that they wanted between the people.
Yeah, and just as bringing up the comments from our followers today, you can see, there's differences of opinion, but then there's also ways that we're looking at how it is that we can be together. We've got Uncle Bob who's on here every Friday, and Bob goes around and he preaches the Bible. He doesn't preach the religion.
Yes.
And he doesn't take everything literally, and he doesn't believe certain aspects of the Bible, because it creates some of the division within the belief, that actually takes away from the value of the belief. And those are critical things to be aware of, and to recognize that oftentimes when you're in church, or you're being taught the Bible, you're being taught an interpretation, somebody's interpretation of the Bible.
And you said it there, somebody's interpretation, because that was a human being that wrote that. So you don't know in what situation that human being was, because the text over the years and over all the Bibles and how it's been translated, it's all been lost. So the one thing that I teach my kids, I don't teach them about religion, but I teach them that there's a higher power, a source. You can call it whatever you want. And how I teach them to treat people with respect is because we all have God inside you. The answers are in you. It's how you treat people. So if you speak to another human, you need to know that you are connected to source, which means they are connected to source, which means if you talk to them, You are literally talking to God, so you need to treat them with respect, because if God was standing next to someone, would you be gossiping about them like that? No, you wouldn't. Now suddenly you want to treat them with respect, but when you think it's not necessary, you don't have to, and you have to live in that purpose every time. And it's difficult. People test you. It's difficult. We're all human. We're all human, but it's how you grow and how you teach yourself to help to help your next fellow man, and to help them grow, and to help them see love for themselves and for humans on earth, because nobody is more superior than anybody on this earth, and we all deserve equal rights and equal opportunity. Doesn't matter what your skin color or your religion or anything is.
Well, and this, it's interesting what Shauna says here, because that is exactly
How I
how
feel
my
about it
dad
as well.
talked about religion. My family, my father's side of the family is Jewish. They're not real strict Jewish. And just to give you an idea of how, variable things can be, like on his side of the family, they weren't really strict. And what they would do on Christmas time is so my mom is Protestant. They wanted my mom to make ham for the holidays, because they would eat the ham if it was prepared outside of their house. But ham and pork is against the strict Jewish beliefs. So I think that in that case, to me it's a healthier way of looking at things. It's like, okay, I get this. I'll uphold parts of this. And this is how everybody, and I'm including myself and everybody else in the world, you're picking and choosing what you're actually going to follow out of this.
You have choice. You have free will. That's the one thing that the Bible says. You have free will to choose your surroundings, to choose who you hang out with, to choose what you spend your time on. That's the one thing that Source gave you free will. And if you can go back to what Brian says, he agreed, you can be religious about your workouts, how you get dressed, and how you go throughout your day, but your relationship with God is yours. And if you don't have that good relationship with God and with yourself, you're not going to have good relationships with people, because it all comes down to respect. Do you respect their cultures? Do you respect each other? Because it's a mutual respect. You can't respect and not be respected.
Yeah. And even, I see where, Mama Gotti is, saying that if you go back and you look at the original Bible and in Hebrew and things along those lines, the question is still, you don't know exactly who wrote it and how they wrote it. And what they did is they were writing it years or decades or more after the events supposedly occurred. So
Yes.
there's an interpretation, even in the original writings, of what happened. And you take it from this perspective. If you take a set of twins, are as close to being genetically the same as possible, and say they were raised the same, but each time an event occurred and they saw a pen, one of them saw it from this side, the other one saw it from this side.
Exactly.
So their interpretation of what the pen looks like is different.
And
On
what the
this
pen
side,
means.
you have the clip for the pen. On this side, you don't see that. So your interpretation is different. And that's the kind of thing that we have to be aware of, that perspective, literally perspective, from being just that far apart can make a world of difference in terms of what you see. Did you see the person behind the car? No, the car was in the way. I could see it. You couldn't. All of a sudden, the world is different. And that difference gets into your brain, and those differences in perspective changes the way that you look at things in the future as well, how you perceive them to be in the future. And that's a real cool thing. But at the same time, it can create, major differences in how people interpret events, and how they interpret events is how they filter them through their belief systems or create new belief systems. So all of those things are really amazing. And what's interesting, I think that I just saw here, we've got a comment from our guest that's going to be coming on later in the show, and he's going to be talking in terms of the effects of isolation and finding power and connection. And I think that these types of things can drive you in a particular direction. Some people get driven into being very gregarious, very much outside and talking to people, and when they get isolated, it really freaks them out. Other people are driven inward, and they kind of close the door as much as possible so that they could process things and be alone. Those are two different ways of possibly reacting to a very same event, but looked at from different perspectives. And we need to get back to, like I was saying before, talk to the person one-on-one and find out where those commonalities are. And a lot of those things that you think are so different really aren't. You take a look at Islam and Buddhism and even Hinduism and Christianity and Judaism, and there's very common storylines throughout their beliefs throughout.
So if you guys, sorry for interrupting you, I like what Brian said on TikTok. There's a guy, he calls himself the Friendly Satanist, but he's not a Satanist. It's just his TikTok name, and he's extremely clever in the Bible and the teachings, and he does his PhD on that and everything. And he actually had a conversation. He lets people come on the live and talk to him, because a lot of people in South Africa take him out and bashes his beliefs and everything, and the comebacks that he have explaining to them where the Bible comes from and the truth about the Bible, because he studied that, is so interesting. So if you guys want to, you need to go check it opens your mind to that it's not about the Bible, because again, the Bible says, do not worry you about things on the outside world, because once you close your eyes, absolutely nothing except your knowledge and your memories and the legacy that you leave behind on how you treated people are the things that leaves behind, not your money, not your reputation, because in 20-30 years nobody's going to know anything about you. Nobody's going to know. So it's all about how you align. Are you enlightened? Have you seek God, or have you found God inside and lived in his truth and showed how he loves you and you loved your fellow man the same? And that is the main focus of the Bible, is preaching love, because everywhere in the Bible it preaches love. It doesn't preach racism. It doesn't preach hate. That is what the Bible is for, is getting you back to that love for yourself and love for God and love for your fellow men, because nothing, not even your religious beliefs, goes with you to when you die. And that's how I see it. That's why it doesn't matter who you pray to, as long as it comes from a place of love. Because how can somebody that was born in Buddhism be condemned to hell because they're not praying to the Christian God? You can't say it like that. You can't condemn a person that was born into that life because it's the wrong religion, according to Christians of today. And I'm not saying everybody, because again, as Brian said, it's what your relationship with God. So that is their relationship to their God, because it's all internal. It's got nothing to do with the outside world. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah, and this all comes back to a lot of what's going on in the world today, whether it be the way that differences are handled in South Africa, as you had mentioned before. There's a lot of violence in the way that happens, and we've experienced some of that kind of violence here in the U.S. recently, with these differences of opinion and differences of that are based upon some kind of a superficial observation as opposed to an in-depth understanding of the individuals involved and the perspectives. It's like when you have people that say, are watching like the O.J. Simpson trial. I don't know if you ever heard of that, but O.J. Simpson was a sports figure who supposedly killed his girlfriend and all this stuff. And there's those that said he did it, and there's those that said he didn't. None of us were there in the courtroom hearing the details. None of us were there to actually see and observe the event. So everything that we are doing is interpretations of what others saw and then communicated
From their
as
perception.
gospel of what happened. That's where, interpretations of interpretations of interpretations creates, it's kind of like that. There used to be some kind of like a game called telephone where you would have people around a circle and somebody would start it off. And by the time it got around, was it the same story or not? And it all depended on how, some people played the game seriously. Other people interjected things because they thought it was going to be fun to interject something. And that's how life is. That's how life is. And that's why we need to be open and not take things so seriously about what we heard, because what we hear is only part of what happened, and it is filtered through whoever told whoever, and then it comes to our filters, and we have our own filters. We have to have filters. That's what kind of the religion and beliefs and all that stuff is really filters, because there's so much stimulus coming into us on a minute by minute basis, literally. I mean, you don't sit there. I mean, I know that you're there and you're saying it's so humid. What?
I'm dying, and the wind's blowing. I can't open the door.
But you're sitting there and you're experiencing these things, and you're hearing the rain on the roof, and you're seeing the wind outside as it's blowing leaves, and all this stuff is going on. But most of the time, you don't even know it because you're not focused on it. But it's happening, and guess what? Your ears are still hearing it. Your eyes are probably still seeing it, but you're not actually registering it because you've got filters and things, and you're focused on something else. And that's part of, what we really need to be aware of and be conscious of in how we interpret everything that happens around us, the things that we hear, and even inside us, how we interpret things. So really, really interesting. And we're not really trying to get into the differences of religions and things like that. What we're trying to do is bring up that there are many, many ways to interpret everything that happens in life.
And therefore, the reason you should not judge, because you do not know what another man was given in his life, the lessons he was given, the situations that they were given. Everybody has a story. There's so many people that have been affected generations and generations and generations with sexual abuse, and generations with verbal abuse and physical abuse. So you don't always know where it comes from. My main reason why I do not mix with Christians, and I'm going to say this because the people that took me to Sunday school, and they were the persons that hurt me the most in my life, and still does, and they read their Bible every night, and that is what puts a lot of people off religion. And as Mama Gotti said, I mean, we all have an opinion, but nobody's forcing anybody's beliefs or opinion on them. And that's why this is such an amazing platform to talk about these things, because somewhere out there's someone that has no religion and has never heard the word of God, and they might hear something here today and think, you know what, maybe I must go read the Bible, because God works in mysterious ways.
Yeah, and I think that's, there's been, I mean, just look at the Catholic religion and how the religion itself was being used by the the leaders of the religion to manipulate kids and things along those lines. And then it's hidden because they don't want it to come out that there's these things going on within the monasteries and the leadership. So, that's where, like you said, it's interesting because we're all going to make some level of generalization or some level of prejudice to begin with. The thing that we have to recognize is that it happens, and then we need to say, oh, I think that. Why do I think that? And is it really true? And sit back before we start reacting and responding in ways. We need to have that active communication within our own self to say, hey, let me put a check on this. Let me open up. Let me look a little deeper. Let me think about this, because maybe I didn't know that the guy who just gave me the finger had an extremely terrible thing that happened in his life today. And it's not the person that is bad. He had a bad action or a bad response. That doesn't make him a bad person. And oftentimes we do that same thing to ourselves. And this is where we really get into the challenge. We say, I'm a loser. No, you're not. You did something that maybe didn't give you the outcome you expected. That's an act and an event and an interpretation. It is not that I am a loser. Okay, I didn't achieve what I wanted to with this action. That doesn't make you a loser. That just means that something didn't go the way that you thought. And when we generalize and start saying those things like, I can never do this, or I always do this, that's bullshit, because it's almost, the words like never and always and stuff are just too general to believe in, and you have to open it up.
I like what Brian says here. There have been Amazonian tribes, and I don't think a lot of people think about all the tribes and all the people around the world and what they've been born into. He says there have been Amazonian tribes isolated from the world that missionaries have visited for the first time, and they hold the same ideals as Christianity. God is inside us, and that is...
Yeah, and that's where I say there's so much commonality when you get out of classifying it or generalizing it under a particular title or belief. We all in general would like to have a better environment to live in. Now, we say, yeah, we want the trees, we want, the animals, we want all this. And yet at the same time, we say we want our own houses, which consume the trees and take away from the animal space and all that kind of stuff. So there's priorities, and each one of us have our own priorities. And those priorities make a huge difference on when we all say, yeah, I want to have clean air to breathe. Okay, I want to have clean air to breathe, but I also want to have a car that I can drive around whenever I want to. Well, there's a bit of
both.
Yeah. So that is based on our priorities. Why are some people buying electric cars and others are still saying, no, I'm buying a gasoline powered car? It's because of their priorities and how they're perceiving their actions. And oftentimes you make those actions on information that is not complete. So a lot of people think, oh, I got an electric car, I'm not polluting at all. Bullshit. The cost of creating those cars, the recycling those cars, and the energy necessary in order to power those cars all create pollution. So the carbon footprint of electric cars is not as great a difference as a lot of people believe from combustion.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
But is it less than a normal car, Or is it almost the same that it doesn't really matter?
I'm not sure 100% that there's been a real serious end-to-end look at it in terms of the carbon footprint required and the damage that you have to do to the environment in order to get the rare earth elements and the lithium and things like that for the batteries, and how that's creating pollution as well as destroying the earth and destroying the environment. But there's been some studies that show that an electric car all in maybe 25% less impactful on the environment. But if you go beyond that, if you start saying it's 50%, that's baloney. It's not. It's not true. But 25% or 20% or even 10% is still better than not. But you need to really understand what's going on behind it. And normally the numbers that you get, just like for the vaccine, the numbers that you get tend to be the numbers that were analyzed by the companies that have their vested interest in selling you the product. So is what you're hearing the real truth?
That's always the case. How do you know what is the truth? How do you know what is the real truth? Because you can even get fake news on the internet and you think it's true, and then eventually you find out, like say for instance this death hoax that they had at the stage through Facebook. You got all these death hoaxes of celebrities dying, and then everybody goes like, oh, he's dead. But if you go and Google the guys so alive, it's not even funny. So how do you know? How do you discern between what is real and what is not?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if the numbers that Brian is showing here, it would take roughly driving an electric vehicle 150,000 miles before you kind of break even in terms of carbon footprint. Most people never drive their car to be 150,000 miles. Most people buy another car or get another car before that happens. So you really need to,
right? I mean, that's a whole conversation for a whole nother episode. Because if we start on Epstein now, it's gonna take so long. Thanks, Brian. I'm with you there. I'm also like, that's a bit dodgy. That's too convenient.
Yeah. There's. And again, this is all about what we see, what we hear, which are interpretations of why weren't the cameras on? Were the cameras on, but somebody's, wiped out the tape. We don't. Here's somebody who is supposed to be watched 100% with cameras and everything, and yet we still don't know the story. Why? Because there's things around that are interpreting or causing us to see only a certain aspect of what was happening. And we have to be very aware of that. That's how governments do things to control people. That's how
they put the fear in people. Yes.
It's really, really interesting that, and this is what I appreciate about our community here. I think that, just through what we've been, showing up on the screen in terms of people's interpretations, people's perspectives, that we have an audience that's willing to think for themselves and willing to open up. And that's really about how do we create a better life for ourselves? How do we overcome some of the challenges that we have? The whole concept of delight being here for people that, are open to new things and that are trying to address things. It's all about opening up. It's all about being able to be confident enough in yourself to question yourself, to question your beliefs, and
you
to
only
share
have responsibility over
in a
yourself.
loving way.
What people don't understand is you have no responsibility over the next person. I don't even have a claim on anybody's soul, not my kids, not my parents, nobody, not even someone that I'm in a relationship. Do I have a claim on their life? Because if you are responsible for your life, then you make decisions because you're the one that is going to, at the end of the day, be responsible for the decisions that you've made. Nobody else. Nobody else. I think that's why they also say there's three sides to a story. There's always your side, my side, and the truth. Because you don't always know why someone did something from their side, because you do not know the history and you do not know that. So it makes it difficult. It's difficult to be like Sweden, just neutral to everything, because that's
Well,
how
it
you're
is.
supposed to be. You need to be neutral to anything. You do not need to react to anything that anybody says. You don't always need to give a reaction, because you have no idea where that person comes from their opinion or what they were taught. So how do we know who's wrong or right?
Yeah. And that's it. And, there's oftentimes that we react and we don't even know why we reacted that way. And this is going back to our senses and how much we bring in, but we're unconscious of it. There sometimes our reaction to something is because we heard a noise, we heard a song, we heard a voice that sounded like something in our past, which triggered a memory that then caused us to respond or react a certain way, but we didn't consciously really think about it. It happened because of a stimulus that we didn't even maybe consciously recognize. The same thing goes with smell. You could walk through someplace and all of a sudden you get these, you start remembering things and you're like, wow, I haven't thought of that for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Why was it? Because there was a smell that was associated with something 30 years ago in your life that you hadn't thought about, but that smell triggered your brain to bring that memory back in front of your eyes. And it's craziness, but this is how the brain works. And this is why it's so important that we think about these things before we react, or if we do react, to think about, why did I just do it that way? Why did I respond the way that I did? Because that's not me. Well, actually it is you. It's your brain responding to certain things that you just didn't consciously know about. And we can follow some of those things down paths. We start to follow our reactions, our responses, and we follow it down a path. And then we get so far down the path, we forgot why it is we actually got to where we are. And then sometimes we have to backtrack. And I think that may be part of the story that we may hear with our guest today. You start going down a particular path and okay. So I don't know how many people out there have been a part of a multi-level marketing company. But if you go to a multi-level marketing company, and I've been a part of a lot of them, and that's not my personality. Now I know that after spending thousands and thousands of dollars doing these things. But the thing about that is they create kind of a community. They create these meetings that you go to on a weekly basis. They create this thing where you start to believe that everybody is believes this way, believes that this, whatever the multi-level marketing thing is, that it is the thing and everybody believes it. No, it's only within that community that belief occurs. And until you break away and recognize, oh, that is what they're trying to indoctrinate us with. And it may not be indoctrinate with a bad connotation, but they're trying to educate in a particular way that supports the product or service or whatever it is that they're selling. It's kind of like church, very much like church. And if you go to church every Sunday, that you think that everybody should believe the way that your congregation does. But that's not true. You get outside the congregation and be in the same religion, the same type. You go to a different church and it's a different type of a feel oftentimes. So this is just the way that we are, in the way that we interpret the world around us. And if we surround ourselves with people that are thinking similarly, or we start to think along their lines, then oftentimes we believe that this is the way, or this is the way the world is, when in fact it's not. It's just in the way of the people that we are associating with at the time that we start to feel that the world is the way that it should be. And like I said before, you can should all over yourself, but I don't like to live in my shoulds.
Nah, neither do I. I get Mama Gotti here because I've been triggered lately a lot by a lot of things, and even I'm doing this interview and having my past that I had and all that. This morning I was thinking about the effect that our topic and all that had in my life and in my relationships and in my marriage and all those kind of things, and that kind of triggered me to be very, very nervous, if I can say that, but not nervous, going and saying, seeing where I've come from when I decided to get divorced and dealing with that and how that was dealt with in my relationship and anything. There's so many things that trigger us. The best is just to go inwards and see, why does it trigger you? What is the lesson that you have to learn from that, to not get triggered by these things and react like that and just flow. But sometimes you need to say something, and that is why you get triggered, because sometimes we are the voice to teach other people's lessons, other people lessons as well.
Right. So with that, I think it's actually, this whole conversation that we're having today is actually kind of a good lead in to our guest, and a topic that many people will consider to be
taboo,
that will continue to be, I think, controversial. But that's good, because we need to be open and understand that there are different things in different people's lives that we haven't ever experienced and we don't even know exists. And yet there are groups of people that have these similar type things that we don't know about. I was first exposed to, many different beliefs and thinking that I had never heard of it before. Every day we hear that. So I think that that's part of what we're going to learn more about today. Did you want to read the bio?
I did. And then I'll read the bio. You play the ad because I need a break for a minute.
Okay.
I drank too much coffee. And then while the ad's playing, I'll just run, and then I'll be back in time. Okay, so we are interviewing. Today is a very, very interesting interview. Today we'll be interviewing our special guest, Bill Ranshaw. He is a recovered porn and sex addict, 36 and 25 years respectively. I've stopped porn and masturbation on March 21st, 2017. Shortly after, I became addicted to opioids and cocaine. I never had substance addictions before in my life. I became dedicated to stop the cycle once and for all. It was when I developed the system for remaining porn-free for life. Since I stopped porn, my life transformed. I won 3 Emmy Awards, produced an Emmy Award-winning documentary short film, became financially independent, and most of all, I found the love of my life, and now I'm engaged. Today, I coach men, 7 disciplines I use to quit porn for life and achieve ultimate potential success in their life. I'm very excited about this, and I hope we can reach the right people with this message and this interview.
Yep, looking forward to it. I think it's going to be enlightening, and hopefully I press the right button here in order to start the show. That the introduction, well, the sponsor.
I'm ready to run. Just press the button.
Okay, you ready? I'm going to hold off until it's too late.
No, that minute is enough for me. Just play.
Okay.
Pretty face on, please.
All right. Oh, wrong one.
Waiting.
My name is Brandon, and over the past year, the Delight Cafe team and I traveled across the U.S. researching this rapidly growing industry of CBD products. What we have found throughout the industry were products that were inconsistent in dosage and used ingredients that weren't even lab tested. Products with chalky textures, bitter aftertaste, and worst of all, confusion among the CBD consumers. That's why we created Delight Cafe. A 15 milligram lab-tested, all-natural, water-soluble hemp CBD powder pack. It's odorless, colorless, and tasteless. Add it to your favorite drink of choice, wherever, whenever, on the go. Quickly find your calm, your balance, your delight when you need it most.
Well, we're back. And we are going to introduce our guest today, Bill Ranshaw. Good morning, Bill.
Good morning to the both of you. What an exciting show. I'm so glad to be a part of this. It's been very intriguing and interesting to watch the comments and hear you chat. I love this platform and the conversation that everybody's kind of having on the side. So I'm humbled to be here and hope I can provide some value to everybody listening and watching and ready to share my story. I think, as we all know, this is live, and around my house, there's dogs. There's my fiance's running around, so who knows what might pop up in the background around here. So I'll be forewarned.
Same with us. I've got people coming in, and we've got big dogs. This is a doggo friendly, so whenever your dog comes in, you can just pop his head so everybody can go, ooh, and just love on him, please. Thank you sorry, Brett.
No, go ahead.
Thank you so much for joining us. I think this is not a topic that gets talked about often because not a lot of people will admit that they have a problem with that. And from there comes my first question. How do you know that you are just watching porn for watching porn, or how do you know that you're an addict and you have a problem?
Yeah, God, that's such a great question, because for years I never considered myself a porn addict. I considered myself just like every other, human being. It wasn't like some of the guys I coach where, it can be, multiple times a day, multiple hours a day. I was a casual porn watcher, a couple times a week, maybe once every other day. And never once considered myself a porn addict. It was much later in life. I mean, we're going to dive into this really quick. I usually tell people, like, if you are struggling in areas of your life, and if you've done everything, if you've done all the personal development, self-help, you've read all the books, watched all the videos, but yet you still aren't connecting in such a way that isn't making sense, that's when you start looking at all the things in your life that could be having adverse, effects. And for me, it was years of struggle in disconnect, numbness. Most people probably wouldn't have seen it on the outside. I was, I was probably considered charming, and I found a way into sales, and I had a pretty decent life, what most people think. But I was numb, and probably underlying depression. And it was a friend of mine, probably around 2014, 2015, who saw me like trying and failing at multiple things and not really succeeding. And he just said, "Do you happen to watch porn?" I said, yeah, fuck yeah, I do. As much as the next guy. And he said, well, maybe just consider that could be a problem in your life and causing these problems. I said, duly noted, thank you, but no, I'm just fine with my porn. And but that's all I needed, was that little bit of seed from him. To every time I was feeling disempowered, I wasn't succeeding, and I was feeling lack of self-confidence, whatever it was, I just started thinking, could it be the porn? Could it be it? And realized at that point in time, I started doing a lot of research around it, and all the effects that it has on your brain and your entire being of who you are. And that's when I realized I need to do something about this and get rid of it out of my life. And addictions, porn isn't officially considered an addiction in what they call the DSM-5, which is a book from scholars and psychologists that label addictions. And there's some political reasons around why they don't want to list porn as an addiction. But if it walks like a duck, talks like a duck. And the challenge in what you look at as addiction is, if you're doing something in your life and then you realize that it's bad for you and you still can't stop it, that's when I start labeling it as an addiction. But I also tell people, because most people were in the same boat as I was, like, they don't consider themselves an addict. So I used to call myself a porn addiction recovery coach, and everybody would tune me out. well, I'm not addicted. I have a good, healthy relationship with porn. It's until you realize, even the casualest of users, the effect that it's having on your life. And I used to be in the school of thought that, like anything else, in moderation is fine. I hear that all the time. Porn is healthy. And when I first began this journey, I would think that. I would say, I was an addict, but for other people, it's fine. I have since come to the realization that, porn is healthy in your life until one day it's not. And there will be a breaking point at some point in your life when you realize it. I typically find that I find men that are finding me, and women. I'll specifically talk about men. That's who I work with, but this affects both genders or both sexes. And they find me when they start hitting their 30s, because as we grow up, it's just part of our life. We grow up thinking, yeah, this is a normal thing. I started watching, the magazine, looking at magazines. The internet was just coming around. My dad had the big giant satellite dish in the back of the yard that would turn. And, I think he bought that because he wanted to watch porn. He said to watch all of his sports. But, at the time when you had one of those satellite dishes, if you turn to channel 3, it's on every TV in the house. And so
Okay.
he was downstairs and I could turn to channel 3 upstairs and he was watching porn. And so it was just one of those things. And I had early access to it. And again, it's just one of those things that you do. You grow up. And it becomes so indoctrinated, speaking of those terms you mentioned earlier, into our soul and who our being of who we are. We don't realize the hold that it's having on us. And unlike other drugs where people find later in life, whether it be alcohol, marijuana, or anything else, porn is a sneaky little thing because it's free, for one, nowadays, and the intensity and everything about accessibility is incredible. And people and kids are now finding it at such early ages, 4, 5, 6 years old, where before in my youth, it was maybe around 10, 11, or 12. And I often tell parents that I speak to just to be mindful, because I say, your kids are no longer finding porn. Porn is finding your kids in multiple facets. But, to kind of bring it back to your question about knowing that you're an addict, it was really that point where I was numb to the life, and I created the association that porn was actually the cause of everything bad in my life. Whether that was true or not, I suspect that it is. We can talk about that, but it was just that powerful association that I put to it that allowed me to stop. And after I stopped, that's when I started noticing the minute little increments of positive change in my life. And it's not just an overnight thing. You really have to pay attention. Sometimes it gets worse than it gets better, just because the way our brain has been trained in so many different facets of numbing. It's a numbing device for it. So that's a long-winded answer to your question, but hopefully that gives a little bit of insight.
Well, I think it's interesting because oftentimes, and this kind of goes back into the discussion even before you came on, is that oftentimes in religions, especially certain religions, sex is considered sinful or considered taboo, and taboo is oftentimes attractive to people. Okay, why is it that I shouldn't do this? Why is it that I shouldn't do that? Or what is it that they're telling me I shouldn't do? So now I'm going to go seek it out and find out what it is. And then you're like, oh, I'm doing something that I'm not supposed to do, which is always kind of an exciting thing for people. It gets your adrenaline rushing. And that adrenaline feeling is something that is also addictive. How you satisfy that adrenaline or need for adrenaline or need for feeling different or feeling significant or feeling, that's oftentimes how we go down paths. It's not just porn. It's bike riding. It is running marathons. I mean, you get a runner's high and they continue to do that. And so there's many different ways to satisfy the basic need, but it can take you down paths that eventually put you into, whether it be porn or drugs or other things to satisfy kind of that feeling.
You're right on the money with that. And the crazy thing about porn is when we find it as young people, and I talk about this also, is that porn isn't really the problem. Porn became a coping mechanism and escape for many different reasons, either a numbness, it helps you deal with anxiety. There's certain many things. And as children, where it's so powerful and to be mindful of is in our teen years, and I'll get scientific on it, those are the years where our limbic system of our brain is really forming. And that's where we start in our brain understanding the baselines and dealing with fear, anxiety, stress, even joy, happiness, all those type of things. That's why when we're teens, we're very emotional and everything's like it's either the end of the world or it's the greatest thing, because our brain's trying to figure out how to deal with all these type of things. Well, during those years, those formidable years, we're also watching porn, and porn in itself, just like another drug, chemically really spikes certain points of your brain, typically dopamine on the motivation side. And you start associating dopamine spikes with dealing with certain anxieties and stresses or even pleasures and feel goods in your life, that they just become linked as one. So it automatically becomes tied to many triggers in your life. And it's really talked about, and I think Mama Gotti was talking about triggers earlier, is I work in my program helping men really understand the triggers, because porn is ultimately, it's the negative behavioral response to some other type of trigger that started early on, either throughout the day before, that leads you up to that ultimate level of compulsion that you have to take care of. And understanding the triggers, and ultimately when you can understand them, identify them, and deal with those feelings and emotions and thoughts, and create a positive, empowering behavior rather than the negative compulsion behavior, you can start changing those links out and create an empowered life. And when we're talking about, it's interesting when you're talking about religion, I think Brian mentioned, we can be, have a religion to anything of, it could be working out, it could be work, it could be all kinds of things. Those, work can be an addiction. But it really is coming down to, I tell people, find an empowered way of being. And that's always the litmus test for what you're thinking and how you're showing up. If you're showing up feeling stressed, lack of self-confidence, not self-worthy, depressed, just know that there is an alternative way of being at that particular point in time that you could be showing up. And so start making choices and decisions that leave you in an empowered state of being rather than a depressed, negative, self-loathing state of being.
I just love how you say that. Mama Gotti she said, I think porn gives boys and men unrealistic concept on how to treat women. And this actually comes from, links to my second question, which is how did the porn addiction affect your romantic relationships, or the romantic relationships that you were in?
Oh, it destroyed it, made it non-existent. And that's a great point that she makes. And it's probably the number one point that a lot of people talk about. And in my life, I don't talk a whole lot about my journey of porn leading to sex addiction. But when I grew up, I was a very shy, introverted kid, and I had porn I could go to. I had it, and I could find it. And if I was in high school, I was the guy that I would have married the first girl that talked to me. I had a crush on any girl that looked at me. I was that guy. And when I got to college, I started working out and getting a little bit of self-confidence. And then it was around that time the internet came out, and man, the floodgates opened with that. And so the internet was a brand new way to meet people. And I was able to develop ways to start meeting women and having hookups. But is what I later understood is that I was approaching women in ways to want to hook up. And before it was like certain ways, it was a trial error. And you know, we can get a little bit graphic here. I actually developed a system where I would start a flirty conversation, and I always thought, what's the quickest? How do I get the quickest time frame of me talking to a girl to where I could be hooking up with her? And so it was always conversation. It used to start off, well, I had a beginning, middle, stage, talking, getting to know them, closing the deal. It was all things. I kept, how do I narrow that time? How do I narrow that down? And then I realized, well, how do I have a conversation that probably isn't threatening, where most guys like hit on girls and it feels like a little threatening. And the system that I developed was I would start a flirting conversation, and then it would lead to, hey, I have a fetish that I want to share with you. If you might be open to it, if the girl is receptive, I would share it. And basically, and I thought, how can I say something that is non-threatening to the female where she might be intrigued? Again, this was over years of really just honing down this particular approach. And they said, well, yeah, that's a little intriguing. What is it? When you talk about something, Brett, that's taboo, women have the same type of, ooh, this sounds interesting. What is it? And so I would share, well, I have a fetish of masturbating in front of a woman while she sits across the room from me and watches. And I found that most women were open to that. It was non-threatening. You don't have to do anything. And so it would gauge. And that really shortened that window. And ultimately, it ended up where I could be chatting with somebody, meet them on a dating site or something, and then within an hour, I'm at their place. And ultimately, when you're there sitting masturbating in front of the women, most of the time it turns into sexual interaction. Like, hey, do you want to join or something? So it was weird, and it was just a process of to be able to fit this feeling and satiate this feeling of what I wanted. And then I realized is what I was doing is, if someone did not like my approach, they were turning down my approach and not me. So it became a way to hide from vulnerability of who I really was. And so if I approached someone on a sexual, they turned me down. Well, they didn't like my approach. And I ultimately also in the same world, if they didn't have their confidence was probably low, like mine was, and just looking for some sort of a connection, thinking sexual was maybe it. And so to her point about how it treats and creates the view of women or men's view on women was, it became a very transactional way of viewing women. I don't think ever I degraded, I appreciated women, but it was always a world of transactional. If I do this, what am I going to get from you? Vice versa. It was always that. I really had no concept of understanding intimacy and sharing and connection on such an amazing level, which what I have now. And so you start viewing other people in such a way that becomes just very sexual. So I was hypersexualized because that's how my attraction was to women. And the other thing that porn does when it plays with your own self-confidence is it makes you extremely unconfident because you're only seeing life through one little certain filter that porn typically does not allow you to live up with. And it was amazing because I would watch all kinds of porn, and porn takes many different roads and fetishes, which I never judge my guys on, no matter how despicable they might think it is. But I found myself creating real live porn situations where I'm showing up in masturbating for a group of 10 women, or I'm around a pool of women sunbathing naked and I'm jerking off for all of them, or having, group sex. There's all these weird things that you see in movies. And somehow I made that happen, and it was very easy. But where I learned, where it all came down to connection, where, sex without connection with someone is just basically like, if you're having sex, it's basically masturbation with a vagina. There's still no connection. And that's what I learned. Porn was actually the basis of what led to my sex addiction. And that's when I wanted to root that out. And in and of itself, that's what porn does in an early age. It creates a disconnect in all areas of our life where everything just becomes transactional. Therefore, we're always trying to get more, to feel more. Say, if I do this, I'll feel a connection. I'll feel more. I'll have something. But it was just always numb. It was always unfulfilling. Even at the end, it's like, why did I do that? Why did I just spend half a day trying to hook up with 4 different women? And in the end, nothing to show for it. I'm still depressed. And psychologically on the brain, chemically, it wears your brain out. It has so many other side effects physically, such as adrenal fatigue, thyroid issues. There's so many things that this can lead to in your life. And again, casual porn user led to a heavy sex addiction, but porn was the root of it. And so that is very true. When I stopped porn, that's what I focused on, was connection. And where I've narrowed it down to is connection in 4 areas. That is understanding and getting connection with yourself, other people, the earth, and the universe. And when you say universe, that's spiritual, could be religion, whatever you might be. I'm not religious at all. As you mentioned, Brett, I don't have a religious bone in my body, but I found spirituality about 5 or 6 years ago and realized that's where all of this comes together. And when we talk about isolation and all these type of things, is on a spiritual level, we are all connected. I am you, you am I am the tree, I am the sky. We're all connected when you can really connect with that. And the purpose of what so many people are attempting to do, how you can be controlled and lose your self-confidence, is you lose that connection and you think that you are just an individual. Being just an individual is a good thing. It creates motivation, you accomplish things, and allows you to be a vehicle for purpose. But underlying all of it, when you get connected, that becomes the driving force in your life to fulfill purpose.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, there's a lot that you just said there. One is that, you know, the interaction with women became very transactional, and that it was my act, not me, that was being rejected. It was my approach, not me. That is exactly the same way that they teach salesmen how to sell their product. If you didn't sell it properly, it was not a rejection of you, it's a rejection of your approach. So it's very interesting that it is really very much the same way that they teach salesmen how to sell. You, in this case, were selling yourself essentially to the women. And by not
I think that's probably why I ended up in a career of sales, Brett. Sorry to cut you off, but I ended up in a career of sales and I was successful because it was very much the same. But underneath it all, it was a giant mask and wall that so many people put up in their life for me to avoid being vulnerable and really being seen for who I am, because that, you know, the imposter syndrome is the name that they'll come up with. But if somebody sees me for who I really am, they're going to think I'm a fraud or I'm not worthy or self-loathsome and all those type of things, to where I created this image of what I thought I wanted the world to see. But it was reinforced. The thing is whenever I got to the point where maybe I found a girl that I liked and maybe wanted to share a little bit about me or have them get to know me, I was shut down, put in the friend zone, whatever it might be. And then the nasty thing that came out of that is I started being rewarded by showing indifference to women rather than the ass kisser that I was in high school and college. It was just, rather to avoid the pain of being shut down, I would just become indifferent. Great, you're not interested, I'm not interested. And all of a sudden, women were starting to getting attracted to me. Like, oh, what's this guy got going on if he's not interested in me? And so it found women who maybe had self-esteem issues becoming attracted to me. And in turn, I would meet them and have my lack of self-esteem. We started hooking up in sexual relationships. But it was all a mask to hide away from vulnerability. It's when I came out, and this was the amazing part where how I really broke free from all of this. When my friend first said, consider the porn addiction, I was in a relationship. It was a long distance relationship where I met this girl. It was actually on a holiday break, a Christmas break. I was living in Arizona at the time. She was in San Diego. I met her on a Christmas break. It was for a hookup. You know, she and I hooked up for 4 or 5 straight days, amazing sex. The other thing I'll back up is it also developed in my life where I could have sex, keep in a direction for a long time. I was never able to orgasm from sex. And the only way I could do it is if I finished and then roll over and jerked off. So that was the other side effect. It turned into sexual dysfunction later. But with this relationship, I started becoming numb, sexual dysfunction inside of the relationship. And we ended up breaking up. She ended up thinking I was cheating on her because I'd stopped wanting to have sex, all these certain things. But the pressure was so thick that it just was turning into massive sexual dysfunction. So we broke up, and I was part of a men's group in Arizona where we had there's probably 50 guys. We were really close, workout partners and everything. We'd meet once a month. And I sent an email out to the entire group of guys. And on the surface, my breakup with this girl, everybody got to know her, even though it was long distance. She came into town quite a bit. They got to know her. We just said it was long distance, the reason why we broke up. That's what on the surface everybody thought. But when I shared an email, I said, we actually broke up because I started having sexual dysfunction inside the relationship. It became very depressed. I didn't know what else to do. And it's from my understanding, I think porn is the deep cause of this problem. It was a very vulnerable email that I sent out to my friends. I sent it in a stance of hopefully it wasn't being a victim. It was like, here's what's going on. I was rewarded so well from that email where out of the 50 guys, probably 2/3 of them emailed back, oh my God, I can't believe you shared that. I've never felt more connected to you. In fact, I've experienced certain things in my own life that are similar to that. I thought I was the only one. I didn't know that this was happening to other people. So that was the first time that I was really rewarded by sharing with vulnerability and really finding strength in vulnerability. And that was kind of the path that I started going down there. How can I start getting rewarded? So before, when I have feelings of despair, anxiety, I'm like, let me test this hypothesis. Can I be rewarded and feel empowered by sharing vulnerability? And it kept getting rewarded. So my brain started changing that compulsion disorder behavior to an empowered behavior of sharing and connecting and authenticity. And realizing that that's where connection lives. And to rid yourself of porn or any other addiction, you have to focus on connection in those 4 areas. And that's where my life just goes forward.
I want to, what mental changes and physical changes happened to your body and to your mental health when you stopped watching porn and doing drugs and everything?
Yeah, that's a good point. So let's touch upon that because you mentioned it in my bio. I quit porn, and it was the decision on March 21st, 2017, where that was the day where I actually realized porn is never going to allow me the future that I want and deserve. Once I made that powerful link, any short-term gratification that immediately popped up, I immediately linked to that I'm tired of this numbness. I'll never have a relationship. I'm willing to hold on for the long-term gratification by not doing that and making that association. And so short-term, it did get a little worse before it got better. And that's kind of the panacea that a lot of people talk about in the world of, it's called no FAP is the big term. No PM, no FAP means no masturbation. No PMO is no porn, masturbation, orgasm, different things, semen retention. There's all different variants of what people practice. And it got worse in the beginning because my brain started getting stronger urges. I started getting more depressed in certain areas, following up like a few months after I stopped. But the things that I did notice were little flickers of clarity. The brain fog started lifting away. It started falling away. And so that was just enough to say, I think this is working. And so I'll fast forward to about 8 months. I hadn't had sex. I stopped porn, masturbation, sex, all on that day after having it frequently, weekly, daily, whatever it was, and to stop cold turkey. I wanted to test the hypothesis because I was a single guy. I'm like, is this really working? Because one thing I thought, I want to cure the erectile dysfunction. And so I started, let me back that up. Back to the question about how you see women. When you escape that sexualization of women out of it and where that's your motivation to hook up, you really start connecting. And people say, well, there's this magical thing about attracting women when you start no FAP or you stop masturbation and porn. It's real because when that's not on the table or on the plate, your focus changes when you're talking to a woman or even other human beings, even coworkers or friends. You really start becoming present to the conversations. You start understanding the person. You start building a connection. You start building empathy, apathy, love, compassion. You actually start feeling for another person. And so people pick up on that, and that's where that attraction started picking up. I started noticing other people being attracted to me. And the other aspect was I so blind before and I just dismissed any sort of attraction that somebody had? It's possible. But I was finally tuning into real connection. So that was a little piece of it. But it was about 8 months later. I'm like, I don't know. I mean, am I cured? Do I still have erectile dysfunction? So I did connect with a former hookup. I reached out to her and we hooked up. And this was 8 months later. We started having sex, and I did not orgasm that time, but within a couple minutes, I got real close. It was like, holy shit, I almost orgasmed from sex, and I hadn't for years. And so even that was just enough to say, it's working. And so I went another 4 months. So it was close to a year without sex. And I tested it again. I met for a hookup. And again, I don't advocate my process or whatever the process works for you. That's the only way I could test. It was in that hookup, I actually orgasmed within a couple minutes. And I was doing a happy dance. I was elated. Like, this is the first time in my life I really orgasmed like that. And maybe to her, she's like, is that it? Like, hell yeah, that was it. So I was happy. She was like, okay, couple minute pump chump guy. But I was happy. So I knew the process was working. So I knew the changes were going on. But I really wanted to understand and realize if I, get behind the science of this. And it was, so those are the first points. Then I want to get back to the addiction. It became whack-a-mole. So my brain was missing these type of connections and this dopamine rush and this chemical high that my brain had. I was in a car accident and was prescribed opioids for a shoulder surgery. I ended up having to do back-to-back shoulder surgeries, so I got addicted to opioids. It was circumstantial, but I became very addicted, where I became numb, lethargic. I didn't know who I was. I was depressed. Like, oh my God, now I need this opioid. And it was at that point in time I realized, okay, this isn't a positive path. So I worked with my doctor. I couldn't cut opioids cold turkey. When I did, I almost ended up in the ER. And so I had to do a weaning process. And that scared me because my doctor said this could take 3 or 4 months. And the depression was really high. I'm like, I don't know if I can go 3 or 4 months with this depression. So, but I trusted the process and I went through it. I got out the opioids. And then circumstantially, at the time, backing up, I was excelling in other areas. I was working on a TV show. I was producer, co-director of a show here in Colorado. We produced a documentary short film. I was also working doing sales. Needless to say, I was burning the candle at both ends. And I was having no sleep or anything. And then someone said, hey, why don't you try some blow? Nah, that's not for me. I'm not going to try it. A week later, 0 sleep. I need to do something. I said, hey, what do you think? Score me a bump. Took a bump. Wow. Like cocaine. The first line of cocaine was always the best. That's what they'll always say. And so I got addicted to cocaine for close to 8 months to a year, and I started chasing that high. But again, I had never been addicted to anything, alcohol or anything, but now I find myself addicted to real drugs. And so this is whack-a-mole. This is getting worse. And that's when I realized I got to get to the behind all of this. What is it? And it got to the point where I was living a life for other people. I was working for other people, doing sort of things. But I realized I went back to, how did I stop porn? And let me focus on that. And I re-engineered it and realized it really had to do with connection, authenticity, self-empowerment, and really putting all the pieces together, that there's a real system here, and I found purpose. And one of the documentary films that I worked on was about a woman. She was Miss America 1958. And she was a very promising actress, spokesmodel, motivational speaker. Her name was Marilyn Vanderburg. And her story was, again, Miss America, but when she turned 40 years old, her father passed away. And it had come out that he had been molesting her from the age of 5 to 18. And so we did a documentary film on her. And her story had been told many times, but we did it from a different standpoint. She's now 85 years old, and she's happily married to the love of her life, which was her high school sweetheart. So we told her story around that. But her story was kind of the catalyst to inspire me to let go of everything. And it was New Year's Eve 2019 where I did that. I was very unhappy in my job. I was coming off the addiction to cocaine. I just finished this story. And that's when I realized I have an understanding to get through something that so many people struggle with that are devastating lives. And it was a leap of faith that I said, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but I'm going to help those men. I get emotional when I talk about it because it's so powerful. It was that leap of faith when I took that, and it was that connection to spirituality, because it was an overwhelming feeling of love and internal support, where the universe, I just felt, said, there it is. There it is. You found your purpose. We've got you. We've got your back. That was the feeling I got from the universe. And I've never looked back since that day. I've never worried about money. I never did anything. I didn't know how I was going to do it. I started researching on the internet. Are other people doing this? I found other porn addiction recovery coaches. I hired them. I wanted to see what they were doing. And I even realized then, I feel like they're missing out on something. Because that negative self-thought was, well, there's other guys out there doing it. How could I even do it better? And then I realized, because it's my story, people are going to connect with the way I did it. And then I found out I was very best in the world at it. And I also hope to God, the other people that coach this and do this, that they feel that they're very best at the world at it. And so it was that leap of faith and that connection to spirituality that let me go, that I've got this. And so I figured it out at that point in time.
I think that's a phenomenal story. I think it's the way that we overcome many different things in our lives that don't necessarily have to be this addiction or this real negative thing. It can be just something else in our life that we're trying to change, and we don't recognize oftentimes how it is affecting our lives. It's really interesting because there's a parallel to, I think, how porn can kind of get into your fantasy, your dream, what life is. And oftentimes, if you really look back, and this is something I recognized in my mother, she's got this fantasy of what it is to be like a Cinderella, or, this is what life is supposed to be. And then when life doesn't live up to that, it becomes really challenging. You start seeking out ways, or you start criticizing people or your relationships because your expectation is built on a fantasy. And then it becomes a part of your life. And when it becomes a part of your life, your filters and your belief systems and things start to change to acknowledge it, recognize it, pursue it. So to break that cycle is a challenge, because oftentimes that can be something that goes back very, very far in your life, to where you don't even really acknowledge that this was the influence that got me to where I am today and trying to get out of it. And what can start off as, a little taboo thing, or believing in Cinderella and Snow White, can be very, very similar in terms of how it can progress throughout your life.
Right, it's really true. And when I dissected it and started putting my program together, I really wanted to get something into place to really understand, like, how do you get the other side of it? Like, how did I did it? All mine was trial and error, but go back and how can I like shorten the process? And it really is a transformation. And so when I teach my guys, it's not so much about stopping porn; it's about having a life transformation. And is what happens to so many porn addicts or sex addicts or alcoholics or whatever it is that this becomes so ingrained as a piece of your identity of who you are. And I'll ask men, I said, so what happens if you don't stop watching porn? What's going to happen to your life? And it's, I'll be numb to life. I'm not going to have relationships. I'm going to be depressed. So people can rattle off all the things that are going to happen to them if they don't stop. And so if that's not a big enough deterrent, then what is it? There's a bigger fear somewhere else. And I asked them, what's the biggest fear if you do stop watching porn or alcohol or whatever it might be? And they think, well, I don't have any fears. And I'll say, sit and think about that. And when we start talking about identity, when you take that away and stop it, you're ripping a huge piece of your identity away, and you don't know who you are because you have internalized subconsciously that that's who you are. So you have to start building a whole new identity. I always built the identity over years of Bill was this guy who could hook up. He had all these great, stories. He was fun and amazing. So when I got rid of that, who's Bill going to be? I didn't know. And the other thing that we do, and you hear this so commonly, is when people say, who are you and what is your identity? You start talking about attributes, the way you've lived. And most people say, well, I am the sum of all the experiences that I've had in my past. Very logical to think that and very true. But to lift it and to move forward, you need to build an identity based on the being that you want to be and who you are, rather than the filter of the past, the way life has showed up for you. So rather than the experience you've had in the past, you get to create the new being based on that opens your filter up of what you want to create in the world. And now your mind starts thinking in so many different ways. And that's where authenticity really comes out. And you have to start doing things and you put yourself out there. I always say strength and vulnerability. It's such an amazing place to be. Find people in your life that will encourage that. There's ways to start testing that and enter the world of that and be rewarded by it. Because when you get that space of vulnerability, nothing can touch you. The trolls, people can condemn you. The stuff I get on YouTube and Instagram is, oh, you're just a sissy pussy motherfucker who fucks with his clothes on, with the lights on or lights off, and under bed under the sheets. I get called all kinds of stuff, but I don't let it shake me, because I know who I am now. I know my purpose, my being, and my thought is I'll sit and listen to you, because normally when somebody attacks me, I've realized it has nothing to do with me. It's a whole lot of stuff going on in their world. And so they feel they need to attack. I've said something that's touched a nerve with them. Ultimately, rather than attack a troll back, I sit, I listen, I comment, I don't get angry, I don't get defensive. And I've had a few people actually reach out to me after trolling me, realizing, I'm so sorry. Yes, you said something. I apologize. My life is in shambles. And I get all these, it comes up in so many different ways. So when somebody attacks you, it's never about you, ever. And finding the strength in yourself to really hold on to that and hold compassion for somebody when they are attacking you in such a way was very powerful. And again, these are all powerful traits that I learned to become triggers to the things that used to trigger me to self-defeat, self-loathing, and all those.
Yeah, I think Brian was really good in kind of what he said here, that porn, drugs, whatever the addiction is, it's never the problem, because they are inanimate. The problem is your relationship to your addiction, and also why you ended up there. Like you said, Bill, it becomes part of your identity, and that is absolutely true. And it is, something that we need to, sorry about that. There's some crap coming through here that I'm trying to block.
Yeah, sometimes when I do these talks, spam finds its way in.
Yeah. So I think that, this identity thing is absolutely critical. And that was kind of what I was getting at when I was talking about multi-level marketing and those types of things. Mm-hmm. It becomes an identity. That's basically what you're doing. Your religion becomes an identity. These types of identities then are very difficult for you to even question, much less look back and try to find out, is this really me, or why is it that I believe it is me? And when you start looking at trying to change that identity, and if you take that identity out, if you take that addiction out, it creates a vacuum. And unless you consciously choose what you're going to fill that vacuum with, you will fill the vacuum with something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I felt like my purpose was very deep inside of me. I had to get rid of all the noise. I had to uncover it and unpack it, and really understand that is the I mean, that's the essence of it. And there's no right or wrong. Did we lose Brett?
We did. But
Yeah.
I'm still, don't worry.
Yeah, there's
back.
no right or wrong or one way to live life. I really, my goal is to coach men and people is to find a way to live. When somebody asked earlier, it's hard to know what the truth is. There is no real reality except the reality in our head. And we exist in a million different realities in other people's heads. So we're not the same person in the 1,000 people that know us. We're just a figment of imagination or own reality that they've created of us in their head. And so create a reality of your own that leaves you empowered and powerful and authentic. And there's no right or wrong in that, because it's one life. You get to choose. You get to choose the meaning that's in your life. That was a powerful distinction that I made in my life, is understanding meaning. We so often, our brain will subconsciously associate meaning to things, and usually negative. But when you understand, and it was through a landmark organization where I learned this, where on the surface it sounds bleak, where they say life is empty and meaningless. Well, God, that sounds horrible. But when you really harness what that means, if life is empty and meaningless, we are the creator of our own reality. Therefore, we're creator of the whole world that we live in, that we get to associate meaning to anything that happens to us. So if something happens to you, start training your brain to associate an empowered, powerful meaning to whatever it is. And a great example of this, I could be standing on a subway, not like I have subways in Denver, but someone could come right across and hit me in the face. And immediate meaning is, oh, I'm horrible, I'm ugly, this guy doesn't like me, there's something wrong with me. And I'll give you another analogy. Or, hey, this has nothing to do with me. How can I be empowered? Something's going on with this person. Now the where in my program where I talk about association of meaning is the analogy that I came up with, and an ocean. All right, two inanimate objects, things that exist in the world, are always going to exist next to each other. But if you have this cliff and you have an ocean, and the ocean is always beating on the cliff, and start creating meaning around this, and the ocean is beating, and the cliff says, God, this ocean just beats me on me all day long. I can't stop it. I'm never going to get around it. It takes a piece away from me every time it butts up against me. I'm falling apart. Very negative meaning and association. And the ocean is, I'm a mighty ocean. I can beat on this cliff. I can flood areas. I can provide life to all these animals that live within me. So it's a very positive meaning that the ocean creates. Well, all of a sudden you could flip that around. All right, the cliff can be, I'm a mighty cliff. I support life with all the people behind me. I'm stopping the oceans from flooding and coming over and taking over. Very powerful meaning that we can do. And conversely, the ocean could have a negative meaning that says, I'm just a weak ocean. I can't get around this cliff. I can't get over it. I can't get under it. I can't do anything with it. It stops me every attempt I try to do anything. So no way is right or wrong, but which meaning leaves each of those in an empowered state? Because in reality, it's just a cliff being a cliff and an ocean being an ocean. There is no meaning. But we as human beings have the power to associate that to everything that happens to us, and start training your brain to do that.
That's exactly how I talk to people as well.
First, I just want to say being vulnerable and telling people about an addiction is not easy. I know this. I was a drug addict. I was a cocaine addict for 4.5 years. I know exactly that is one of the most difficult things, is not stopping your addiction, but letting people know that you were addicted and that you had that problem, in fear of judgment and what they will say. So hats off to you, because I know it's difficult to get over addiction. As I said, I was a cocaine addict for 4.5 years, and I went through some of the darkest times after I decided to stop using drugs. And not going back to that, where you go through that dip once you make that decision, I think is some of the hardest times that you get after addiction, is not turning around and going back to that. So I take my hat off to you for that. Well done. Well done.
Thank you. I commend you for sharing that. And I have to say, and I encourage everybody, share with somebody in your life, because it is that thing. I mean, when I found my purpose to do this, I never thought, people always say find the things you love to do and make it a career. I mean, that can be very motivational for many people. I love the country dance. I love telling stories. I do all that. None of that was pulling me forward enough. I was always pushing forward with motivation rather than being pulled by motivation. And never did I think that my purpose was going to be running around telling, you know, a million people on YouTube that I jerked off to porn most of my life. Never thought that was going to be, you know, part of my purpose. But when you realize and you share and you have strength in that, it just is what it is. And most people, when they share it, are very rarely negatively judged on that. It's always either how can I help you or how can I help you get out of this? It's always in your head where that self-judgment comes from. And when you start talking about it, that's where people are drawn to me and drawn to you when you share your stories. Like, I resonate with that. I wish I could be that strong. I wish I could be that powerful, and realize it's the Wizard of Oz. You've got the ruby red slippers with you right now. You're wearing them. You have it. It's there. It's nothing to achieve or gain or go find. It's right there inside of you. You just have to harness it and have that faith that when you share, and it's scary because you can get attacked. People will attack you because of those things. They're going to call you bad names or you're worthless, but realizing that's about them and not you. So you have to build it incrementally, that base of foundation of authenticity of your being, of who you are. And then you just become unshakable.
Exactly. Well, I know we're getting close to the end of the show here, so I want to be able to make sure that people know how to connect with you. I'm going to put a couple of Bill's websites out there into
Okay, I got
our
a question
chat
while
box.
you do that. Can I ask my question while you do that?
Yeah.
Yes, because I think that will go nicely with my question. You've got the 7 disciplines. Is that almost the same as the 12 steps when somebody's an alcoholic? And can you explain a little bit more?
Yeah, there's it's very similar, and it kind of goes through the process. It's funny because I don't really listen to self-help books. I don't watch motivational videos anymore. It's very interesting. People say, do you watch, you know, Brene Brown, or do you watch these? You say so much of the same similar stuff. And it's like I've found my connection. So I just live authentically by who I am. And, you know, my 7 steps are start off on the scientific side of really understanding the science behind it, understanding meaning, and then it transfers through connection, and then a vulnerability and finding purpose. And so that's kind of a quick overview, but you have to understand the science behind it, and then you have to start moving forward. And as Brett said, is when you pull that piece of identity out of you, my program really develops how do you start coping in those spaces of life where you feel small and don't feel successful or whatever it might be, and creating powerful systems and topics and ways of having conversation to make tough conversations just conversation. Creating resentments, addressing issues in your life and getting them behind you, and just addressing things and not letting stuff build up beside you as resentment, and making strong agreements and connections with people, having understandings with people, setting boundaries, all these type of things keep you an empowered being that don't let any of this negativity slip back in, because you're just now a present being. And a lot of that is moving to a present way of living, because the space of wanting is a very dangerous space to be. And so many people live in that space and guilty of it, of wanting something 50 years from now, 10 years from now, or even 5 minutes from now. And that moment of wanting, although it can create motivation, it can give you and put you in this mental state of being of not being good enough or having enough. So there's a fine line there. And make sure that you're living in a present state of being where you feel full abundance, but now your future is moving forward of just creating possibilities and fulfilling possibilities.
Yeah, that's fantastic. This hour has gone by very quickly.
It has.
And
It has.
really appreciate you sharing. I think that the way that you presented this is in an extremely positive way, as you mentioned, even the vulnerability, and we do get emotional when we do have those vulnerabilities, and that's indicative of the fact that we're really coming from our heart as opposed to coming from our brain. And oftentimes the reasons that we can't overcome things is because we are thinking from our brain as opposed to feeling from our heart.
Mm-hmm.
And when you can get to that, where you feel from your heart, you are vulnerable. You're vulnerable to yourself. And I think you've shared that with us, and you shared it in a way that's extremely positive and very, very non-sexually
Mature.
contexted.
Yes.
It's I talk about it so often that it's not even a thing, and I realize that how taboo it could be for people at times. A couple things before we go, because I didn't even get to mention my amazing fiance. You can go to my YouTube channel, find videos where I'll talk about her. She's absolutely an amazing spirit being. She's younger than I am, but is on a soul level we connect. And I never would have been able to find that. In fact, she and I had met 5 years previous when we were both in different spaces of our life and world when I was coming out of this addiction, and we didn't connect then. We reconnected a year and a half later after I'd gone through my journey and found out that this is an amazing person, so I want to spend my life with. So that's one amazing piece. And the one thing I want to share is, because people say, how do I start? Like, where do I start? Like, what's one thing I can do today? And I always, and you go to any podcast, I'm going to end it with this way, is the exercises you can work with, which sounds cliche, but start working and understanding the true power of gratitude. Not just the things that you're thankful for in your life. I talk about that. I've got a video about that. That's going to start building that level of empowerment and abundance. But where you want to hone in and focus is 2 areas. One, how do you receive gratitude and thanks in your life? And how are other people in your life receiving it when you give it to them? Start surrounding yourself and attaching to people who truly, authentically receive your gratitude with humbleness and thanks. And start internalizing it. When people give you gratitude and thanks or compliments, do not brush it away. Own it. Take it. Take that self-worth, because when you diminish that and you shun it away, you're diminishing your own self-worth, and you're also robbing somebody else the gift of giving that to you, that gratitude. So those are good ways to start building that foundations of vulnerability. It's starting one with gratitude. You'll start learning real quick who is receptive to it, who isn't, and start owning it yourself. Building strength and vulnerability.
I'm blown away by this interview and just your energy and everything. Thank you so much for joining us. And anybody, if you're looking for Bill, he's on YouTube, he's on Facebook. You can find him on, I think you've got a website as well.
Yes. It's billwilderman.org. And I think everything's listed below. Search YouTube for my name, Google my name. Best way to find me. I've got ways where you can set up free appointments if you want to chat with me. You kind of have to dig a little bit. I don't just give that away, but if you search a little bit, you can find it. Thank you both so much. My heart goes out to Brandon. Best vibes for him and what's going on there. I love what you guys are doing. I'm so thankful that you accepted my opportunity or my ask to come on this. You guys did not reach out to me. I reached out to you, so I want everybody to know that you guys are fantastic. So thank you so much for letting me be a part of this experience.
Thank you for being part of this experience. I think this is a very good topic, because I don't think a lot of people think that you can get addicted to porn and the effects that it has on your relationships with everybody. And not just that, I think a lot of marriages, and that, as you saw the comments there, a lot of women have that in their relationships and they don't even know how to deal with that. So I think there's quite a bit of women that would also start reaching out to you if they get the message.
I have wives and girlfriends reach out to me all the time. That could be another show even on how to deal with that, because it's very
awesome. I was just thinking of that, because that has affected my relationship, and my 12-year marriage was affected by porn as well, and we didn't even get into a chance to talk about those things. But how we end off the show is we always give our viewers like a snippet of information or something nice to get them during the day, because I'm in South Africa, so I'm going to sleep, but all the guys there are only waking up now. So I'll go first, and then Brett goes, and then you will end off the show, and then you can just give some advice to someone out there that needs to hear some good advice. And thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Awesome, guys. So before the show, as I told you before, I go and I ask for the universe for a message for everybody, and it usually finds me just before the show. And I have this little book on my desk, and I open to a page, and it says, "When you find your purpose, it's like your heart has been set alight with passion. You know it absolutely without any doubt. There's no limit to how you can increase your frequency because there's no limit to the good thoughts that you can think, or the good words that you can speak, or the acts of kindness that you can perform. Besides transforming your own life through lifting your frequency, you will lift others too. The positive frequency of your energy emanates out like a ripple from a stone thrown into the water, touching our planet and every living thing on it. As you rise higher, you take the world with you. Please just stay amazing. Join us tomorrow again. Like, share, post. There's a lot of people that I think can use this message. And thank you for joining us again. Love you lots. Be safe.
Well, thanks everybody. I think the show from beginning to end today has been pretty amazing. I think that we addressed a lot of subjects that are things that are touchy, literally and figuratively, if you want to look at it that way, from a personal perspective. When we're talking about religions, when we're talking about what's going on in the world today, when we're talking about porn and how those types of addictions can affect our life. And oftentimes, in fact, I would say all the time, it really does come down to what we believe is our identity, even though we may have not chosen it consciously. And it is our ability, and this is the great thing about being who we are, is that we have the ability to consciously choose, but you have to be open to be vulnerable and to enter into scary territory within here, because oftentimes here is disconnected from here. So take that opportunity, be in a safe place when you do it. Be around people if you want to that are, give you that comfort, but start to really question and recognize, what is truly your identity, your thoughts and your beliefs versus those that have been given to you throughout your life and how they've led you to where you are today. Because again, oftentimes the path of life is not necessarily the one that we've consciously chosen. It's the one that we followed because others have told us this is the way to go. So thank you very much, everybody. I think the show's been phenomenal. And now I'll turn it over to Bill. There we go.
All right. Thank you again, everybody. The one thing I want to on top of what both of you just said is when you're looking at yourself and again, you don't know where to start, or you're feeling those moments of despair or whatever it is, and you feel like life is over or whatever it might be, do not compare yourself to anybody else in the world. It's very cliche, but just know, take the first steps moving forward. You are worth it. There's so much negativity in the world. The world does not need another victim. It doesn't need somebody else depressed. It doesn't need somebody else that's angry. It needs one more person, you, to take a stand for you and other people in the world, to be loving, to be compassionate, to be a guiding light. And you are worth it, and you have it in you. It's not just for other people. It is you, and it's in you. It's in all of us.
Awesome.
Sorry, Brett. Just before you go, how did you hear about the light? Brian asked, and it's actually a very interesting question, seeing that you approached us.
It was, and I can't remember. It's and if you guys remember, it's Match. It's a podcast website where it matches podcasters to guests and vice versa.
Oh wow!
And I wish I could remember the name of it online. Maybe you could put it in the link below when you guys find it. There's a couple of them that I'm on, so that's what it is. I'm constantly reaching out to where people where the story can be shared.
We appreciate you.
Yes,
for
absolutely.
Out.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for being a part of the show today. We really appreciate your contribution in terms of your comments and everything. And we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And Bill, if you want to hang out for a few minutes after the show, we'll still be here.
Sure.
So everybody have a great day.
Bye, guys.